Hi everyone, welcome. I'm preparing to check in on these two African nightcrawler worm bins. I've got a little bit of food here for them, and the food that they've been getting lately has become sort of a highlight to our check-ins, because what I fed these systems a couple check-ins ago was a bunch of cabbage leaves. So a little different from these radish leaves. If you take pieces of cabbage, not just cabbage, carrots, potato, there's a number of different things that you might be feeding your worms that if you just throw it into the worm bins, it's not going to start decomposing and become worm food right away. Certain things are going to insist on trying to keep growing. And I've had that happen quite a number of times. Potato is the one that just seems to want to do that all the time, very persistently. But more recently we put cabbage, red cabbage, or purple cabbage, I'm not sure which is the right way to think about it. And nice. That was fun. It's always fun to bump in on a couple, or walk in on a couple worms that are mating. You can see the one that's diving is kind of making, stretching the other guy out. I guess more of this guy's body was entrenched in material and the other guy was sort of out on the surface, had nothing to grab onto, so they unfortunately finished what they were doing there pretty quickly in response to me showing up and turning on the bright lights and flooding them with a bunch of dry air. But hopefully I had enough time to take care of business, and maybe at some point soon these little guys will drop off a cocoon or two. I'm not sure if at this point they're able to inseminate. Is that the right way to think about it? You know, I don't know if both worms are at this point capable, or is just one on the receiving end of being fertilized. I'm not sure. Kind of dry out here on the edge. So I breezed through the video last time, and I did note that we had already done something that I've been trying in some of my bins lately, which is to take sort of a hands-off approach to the outer edges, because a lot of times my kind of cookie cutter process is to excavate the feeding zones, which I think we can start right into here already. Apply the feeding, and then turn to these outer edges to bring in material with which we can cover up the feeding. And last time we deliberately steered clear of disturbing the outer edges, but I think this time we can venture out to the outer edges, because I can sense a lot of dryness happening out here. So I want to blend that stuff in and also get a sense of whether or not adding some moisture might be beneficial. I mean, besides those radish leaves I showed you, I've also got a number of cucumbers. So each system will get, I believe, 2 cucumbers plus those radish leaves. The radish leaves probably don't bring much moisture with them. I think the cucumbers probably will. Alright, so my first reaction to this is that I don't see growth, which is what I was hoping for. I mean, there was a lot of cabbage put in here, so I mean, you could find a banana right here, and other than that, the majority of what they would have been given would have been cabbage, unless, of course, now that it had been frozen a second time, just to make sure it really was frozen, and then given back to the worms during the last check-in, perhaps they've actually managed to break most of it down. Except for this, you know, this is the stem, from what I can tell. This is the bottom of the stem, and that's just a large object. Not too surprising if they're unable to work their way through that. But I do believe, I mean, here and there I believe I just did encounter another little piece of cabbage right there, but it does appear to me that that second freezing did the trick, you know. Perhaps on the first go around I maybe threw the stuff in the freezer the night before, and then it just didn't really have a chance to freeze all the way through, and that's possibly why the material was still capable of growing. I saw this little purple thing sticking out through the surface, and I thought to myself, oh no, we're still seeing growth. So it seems like we've got another sort of butt end, stem end, or whatever of cauliflower. Luckily not growing. And this piece here too, is it cauliflower? I'm guessing that that's what some of this stuff is. And wasn't that fun excavating the feeding zone over in bin number 1, there was just so many worms all over the place. So that too, I think, should have served as a little bit of a clue that the worms probably came in and were able to make a nice meal out of that cabbage and are still working on it, because some pieces still remain, but the majority of what was given to them appears to be gone, because there was a lot. I mean, there was a lot of stuff here. In fact, I kind of almost had to like jam it into that that milk carton that I use sometimes. Here we go. I figured I'd just grab it. So this thing right here, not the little one, this big one, this is a whole quart right here, right? 1 quart size. This thing was full of retrieved cabbage bits, which were just refusing to break down. We're just insisting on continuing to grow here in these systems. And into my freezer it went for a good many days just to make sure it was frozen through and through. And I no longer see any signs of stuff trying to grow. What a difference, you know? As long as that stuff is still trying to grow, the worms don't really see it as food, because the top thing on their menu is generally things that are in the process of decomposition. And if something is still in a, you know, kind of fresh enough condition to just try to continue growing, then it's certainly not doing the other thing, which is breaking down. So freezing definitely did the trick here, and I kind of predicted that that would be the case, and I'm glad it was. Let's I'm sorry, I keep having to step away. Usually I equip myself with all the things I need and surround myself with what I need and have everything within arm's reach, but I just had to shoot over to my, well, not shoot over, just reach over to my shelf behind me to grab some of my prepared bedding here, which will drop in as a nice foundation for today's feeding. And what you can see mixed in here is a little extra ingredient that I happen to have a handful of from cutting some wood. I had some sawdust and I piled it in here. And these systems just aren't getting quite as much as a couple other systems that got a pretty good amount of it. So I figured I'd treat these little guys to the last of that stuff that has the, oops, last of the sawdust in it. So this piece, oh no, here too, what the heck? All right. Usually I'm pretty careful to remove all these rubber bands off these bunches of leaves, but it seems like I was asleep at the wheel in this case, and I allowed for a couple rubber bands to sneak through. I saw this one sticking out of the material here. So I already knew we were in for one rubber band, but I didn't realize there were two. All right. This might also be stuff that I received as a contribution from my mom, which I don't always go through so thoroughly. It just, you know, I bring it home, maybe I just chuck it right in the freezer. More recently I've been trying to be a little bit more thorough, but perhaps on this occasion I was slacking. So, all right, I feel like I've taken so much time with that rubber band there. Let's get the heck done here. You know, we could always simply leave things, you know. Maybe I'm just a little too neurotic and whatever. I see so many people throw stuff into their worm bins that have labels on them and stickers and possibly bits of residual packaging or whatever, and I'm always thinking to myself, it's like, geez, remove it, you know. But perhaps from their point of view, they're just throwing it all in there, letting the worms pick off what they can, and then they'll just pluck out anything that doesn't get broken down later. And that's certainly an option too. I mean, anyone can do it any way they please. So I usually gravitate towards trying to keep the stuff that I put in my worm bins fairly free of foreign objects and materials. So last thing I'm going to place in here is a little bit of grit to complement the feeding, and I guess on some future check-in we'll be able to extract those rubber bands. They should be pretty easy to bump into. So I think as we cover up these feeding zones, I'm going to bring in my squirt bottle, because I can already see this material over here is extremely dry. So as we're handling it, that would be probably the ideal time to introduce some moisture into it. And this is actually pretty good, I think, because my spray bottle does have the potential to dispense a fairly large amount of moisture very, very quickly. But right now the pressure's low, allowing for a fairly controlled stream of fluid So I don't want to douse things too much because I feel there's nice moisture in here. It was just the very, very edges that were unprotected from evaporation that showed signs of that. And I think for the most part that offending dry material, at least here in bin 1, has been blended in pretty nicely. So it should be something we could do just as quickly and easily here in bin number 2. Aha, there we go. I had completely forgotten about it. It seems like we're finally starting to see these little handles that came off of like a shopping bag or something. They're starting to break down because that's not the entire handle right there. I believe that was only a fragment. And each system had 2 of them put in here. You know, I should probably be careful about how much moisture I put in here because even though that edge over there was a little bit dry, this one certainly needs no moisture added. So I think, well, here's a little dry bundle of bedding. So maybe I'm speaking too soon. I think we're in good shape here as far as, okay, what's with my trigger? Seems like my trigger's been getting stuck lately. I gotta sort of let it recoil with some momentum in order to stop properly. But I believe that's it for our check-in here with the African night crawlers. I don't believe I recited any stats or info about them, but these bins are now 66 days of age. And this was feeding 7 going in. So these numbers were pretty easy for me to remember. I was thinking to myself, well, 6 is the age, and 6 is how many times they've been fed till now. And I should be able to remember the rest. It was 10 days since the last check-in, and that was pretty easy to remember too. So on this go around, we didn't need any crib notes to help me remember the stats. And yeah, it was definitely fun to bump into these worms while they were perhaps still polishing off the last of the cabbage. We definitely saw a couple little fragments of the cabbage, so it was probably near the end. And if we'd come back any sooner, we probably would have saw some leftovers, but the only leftovers we saw were the 2 big stems and perhaps a little fragment of something that, for whatever reason, was not eaten yet. But I have a feeling it'll be gone pretty soon. So that's it for our check-in now with these 66-day-old African nightcrawler worm bins, doing really nice. And I'm so glad to see that the cabbage was finally eaten. So let's leave it at that. I had a chance to get away with not soiling my clean hand, but I ruined it. Whatever, I'll take care of that later. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.